I was 34 when the ground shifted under me. Old enough to believe I had built something steady, but young enough to be blindsided when it all came crashing down. My name is Daniel, though most people call me Dan. I had a decent job, mid-level manager in a logistics company, not glamorous, but solid. I had an apartment we turned into a home, and I thought I had a relationship that could weather anything. Her name was Emily. She was 2 years younger than me, full of that restless energy that made her laugh too loud in restaurants and dance barefoot in the living room on Friday nights. For 6 years, she was my anchor and my chaos all at once. We'd met through mutual friends at a birthday party, and I was drawn to her before she even said a word. There was just something about the way she moved through a room, like gravity bent toward her. To the outside world, we looked like the kind of couple who had it figured out. We took weekend trips, hosted dinners, posted pictures where our smiles lined up perfectly. But pictures don't tell the whole story. They don't capture the late-night arguments about money, or how she'd sigh when I worked late again, or how sometimes I caught myself wondering if love was supposed to feel easier. Still, I believed in us. I believed in her. That belief is what made everything that followed so brutal. The first crack appeared in a small, almost invisible way. It was a Tuesday night. I'd come home later than usual, traffic stretching out my commute into an hour and a half of red brake lights. When I walked in, Emily was on the balcony, her phone in her hand, her voice hushed. She looked startled when she saw me, like I'd walked in on something private. "Who was that?" I asked casually, dropping my keys in the bowl. "Just Claire," she said quickly. "She's having drama with her boyfriend again." I believed her. Why wouldn't I? Claire was her best friend. Drama with boyfriends was practically Claire's brand. But then, a week later, I noticed Emily smiling at her phone. Not just smiling, glowing, like someone had lit a candle inside her. I asked what was funny, and she said, "Oh, just a meme Claire sent me." She tucked her phone away before I could see. Little things, just little things. A different perfume, a new blouse she bought without mentioning it, the way she guarded her phone like it was a diary. I told myself I was overthinking. I'd been stressed at work. My company had been through layoffs, and I was putting in longer hours to prove my worth. Maybe I was just tired, insecure, making mountains out of molehills. But deep down, something gnawed at me, a whisper I tried to silence. What if she's hiding something? One night, lying beside her in the dark, I stared at the ceiling and felt the distance between us like a canyon. She was right there, her shoulder brushing mine, her breathing steady, but she felt miles away. I wanted to roll over, pull her close, and tell her I was scared of losing her, but pride held me still. Men aren't supposed to admit fear, right? We're supposed to be steady, unshakable. So I stayed silent. That silence was the first mistake. Because the truth is, love doesn't just die in explosions of betrayal. Sometimes it erodes in the quiet, when words go unsaid, when doubts are swallowed instead of spoken. I didn't know it yet, but the story I thought I was living, the story of a man building a life with the woman he loved, was already shifting into something else, something darker. And when the truth finally came out, it didn't just break my heart. It broke the version of myself I thought I knew. The weeks that followed blurred together, but certain moments stayed burned into me like scars. There was the night we went to dinner with friends. Emily dressed in a way she hadn't in months, hair styled, lips painted red, a dress that clung to her like it had been waiting for a special occasion. She looked stunning, and I told her so. But she only smiled absently, checking her phone as the Uber pulled up. At dinner, while conversation and laughter swirled around us, I watched her. She laughed louder than usual, her phone lighting up under the table. When she thought no one was looking, she'd glance at it with that same glow I'd noticed before. I leaned closer. "You seem distracted. Everything okay?" "Yeah, of course," she said, too quickly. "Just work stuff." Then she turned the phone face down, her hand lingering on it like it was something precious. I smiled, nodded, tried to let it go, but inside, something twisted. The following weekend, she said she was going out with Claire. Normally, I wouldn't have thought twice about it, but when I asked where they were going, her answer was vague. "Oh, just drinks, maybe a movie, we'll see where the night takes us." When she came back around midnight, she smelled faintly of cologne. Not mine, not hers, something unfamiliar, masculine, sharp. I remember sitting on the couch, half asleep, blinking at her as she kicked off her heels. "Fun night?" I asked, my voice hoarse. "Yeah," she said, too brightly, "we just needed a girls' night." She kissed my forehead, almost like a mother soothing a child, then disappeared into the bathroom. I sat there, wide awake now, staring at the dark screen of the TV, my chest tight with questions I couldn't voice. That's the thing about suspicion. It eats you alive from the inside. You start second-guessing everything. Was she really working late, or was she with someone else? Did that text notification mean what she said it did? Was that smile for me, or for the ghost of someone else in her head? And I hated myself for it. I wasn't the jealous type. I prided myself on trusting her, on not being the kind of man who snooped through his girlfriend's phone or checked up on her. But now, that trust felt like a rug I was standing on while someone slowly pulled it out from under me. One night, when Emily fell asleep with her phone on the nightstand, I stared at it for what felt like an eternity. My hand hovered over it. The temptation was unbearable. Just one glance, one scroll, and I'd know. But I couldn't do it. Because if I looked, it meant I didn't trust her. And if I didn't trust her, what did that say about me? About us? So I lay there in the dark, my heart pounding, my hand aching with restraint. It wasn't just me who noticed something had shifted. My younger brother, Matt, said something one night when we grabbed beers. "You okay, man? You've been off lately." I shrugged. "Just work stress." He studied me, skeptical. "Work stress doesn't make you stare at your beer like it insulted your mother. What's going on with Emily?" I hesitated. Part of me wanted to spill everything, but another part clung to silence. Saying it out loud would make it real. "Nothing," I muttered finally. "We're fine." Matt didn't press, but the look he gave me said he didn't believe a word. Then came the night that shifted suspicion into near certainty. I'd left work late, again. The office was cutting hours and squeezing the rest of us harder, so staying behind had become normal. By the time I pulled into our building's parking lot, it was nearly 10 p.m. As I stepped out of my car, I saw Emily. She was at the corner of the street, her head bent towards someone else's. A man, tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair. They were standing too close, laughing too easily, and when he touched her arm, she didn't flinch. She leaned in. I froze. My body went cold, my stomach flipping like I'd swallowed stone. I wanted to march over there, demand answers, drag her home, but I couldn't move. My legs were rooted to the asphalt, my heart slamming against my ribs. After a minute, Emily glanced at her phone, said something, and walked away. The man didn't follow. She headed toward our building, alone. I ducked back into my car, pretending I'd just arrived. When she opened the door minutes later, her smile was casual, her tone light. "Hey, you're home late." "Yeah," I said, forcing a smile that felt like it might shatter my teeth. She kissed me lightly, then went to the kitchen, humming to herself. I stood there, my pulse still racing, trying to process what I'd just seen. I didn't sleep that night. I lay awake, staring at the shadows on the ceiling, the sound of her breathing steady beside me. My mind replayed the scene over and over. The way she leaned toward him, the way she laughed, the way she looked happier than she had with me in weeks. By morning, I felt hollow, but I still said nothing. Because love makes cowards of us sometimes. Because I was terrified that if I asked the question, I'd get the answer I feared most. The next morning, Emily acted like nothing was wrong. She made coffee, hummed as she scrambled eggs, kissed me on the cheek before I left for work. I sat across from her at the table, watching her move around the kitchen, and it felt surreal. Like there were two Emilys, the one in front of me, making breakfast, and the one I'd seen laughing with another man the night before. I wanted to ask, who was he? Why didn't you tell me you were out? But the words stuck in my throat. Instead, I forced a smile and said, "Smells good." She smiled back, and for a fleeting moment, I let myself believe maybe I had imagined it all. That illusion shattered quickly. 2 nights later, she said she was meeting Claire again. Something in her tone was rehearsed, like she'd anticipated my questions. "What movie are you seeing?" I asked casually. I don't know yet. We'll decide when we get there." She kissed me quickly, grabbed her purse, and left. This time, I didn't just sit at home waiting. I grabbed my jacket, got in my car, and drove a block behind hers. I told myself it was just to ease my mind, to prove that my doubts were nothing but paranoia. She didn't drive to Claire's apartment. She drove downtown to a dimly lit restaurant tucked between office buildings. And when she parked, he was already there, the same man I'd seen before. I sat in my car, hands gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white, and watched as she stepped into his arms like she belonged there. He kissed her cheek. She laughed, tilting her head back the way she used to with me. The sight was a knife to the chest. I stayed there for almost an hour, heart pounding, stomach twisting, watching them through the restaurant window, watching her lean across the table, eyes shining, fingers brushing his. I felt like I was suffocating. Eventually, I drove home, my head spinning, my chest burning with anger and grief. When Emily came back later that night, I pretended to be asleep. I couldn't bear to look at her, not with the taste of betrayal still raw in my mouth. But she climbed into bed, curled against me, and whispered, "I love you." The words made me want to scream. Instead, I lay still, my body rigid, and whispered back, "I love you too." The lie tasted like ash. The days that followed were torture. I went to work, nodded through meetings, answered emails, but inside, I was unraveling. I'd catch myself staring at spreadsheets, seeing nothing but her face leaning toward his. At night, I'd sit beside her on the couch, watching her scroll her phone, her lips twitching in secret smiles, and feel like I was living with a stranger. Finally, I broke. One Saturday morning, we were sitting at the table drinking coffee. She was scrolling on her phone, smiling at whatever lit up her screen. "Who is he?" I asked. My voice was steady, calmer than I felt. She froze. The color drained from her face, then washed back in a flush of red. "Who?" she said, forcing a laugh. "Don't," I said, my voice sharper now. "Don't lie to me. I saw you, with him, at the restaurant." Her eyes widened, panic flashing across her face. "Dan, I can explain." "Explain what?" I snapped. "Explain why you've been sneaking around? Why you smell like someone else's cologne when you come home? Why you're with him when you're supposed to be with Claire?" Tears welled in her eyes. She set her phone down with trembling hands. "It's not what you think." "Then what the hell is it?" My voice broke on the last word. She looked at me, tears spilling over, lips trembling, but no words came. And in that silence, I had my answer. I stood, the chair scraping against the floor. My whole body shook with a rage I could barely contain. "Do you have any idea what you've done to me?" I said, my voice low, dangerous. "Do you know what it feels like to sit here, thinking we're building a life together while you're giving pieces of yourself to someone else?" She reached for me, tears streaming down her face. "Dan, please." I stepped back. "Don't." The look on her face, fear, guilt, sorrow, was almost worse than the betrayal itself. I grabbed my jacket and keys, walked out the door, and drove with no destination in mind, just the need to get away before I broke completely. I ended up at my brother's place. Matt opened the door, took one look at me, and said, "Jesus, what happened?" I dropped on his couch, my chest heaving, and finally, I told him everything. He listened silently, his jaw tight, his eyes dark with anger. When I finished, he said, "You don't deserve that, man. You don't deserve any of it." "I don't know what to do," I admitted, my voice cracking. "Part of me wants to fight for her, for us, but another—" The night I caught her on the phone with him, I didn't go to Matt's place, and I didn't drive aimlessly like before. I parked my car by the river, killed the engine, and sat in silence. The city lights shimmered across the water, but all I could see was Emily's face when she realized I'd hurt her. That look, shock, fear, guilt, played on a loop in my mind, each replay cutting deeper. I wanted to scream. I wanted to punch the steering wheel until my hands broke. But more than anything, I wanted to stop feeling like I was being torn apart from the inside. After hours of sitting in the dark, I made a decision. I couldn't keep running. I couldn't keep letting her dictate the story while I just absorbed the pain. It was time to confront it all, once and for all. When I finally walked back into the apartment around midnight, Emily was pacing the living room. The flowers I'd dropped were gone, but the faint smell of lilies still clung to the air like a cruel joke. She rushed toward me. "Dan, wait!" I held up a hand, my voice low and steady. "Sit down." She froze. Something in my tone must have told her this wasn't like the other times, because she obeyed without protest, sinking into the couch with trembling hands clasped in her lap. I stayed standing, needing the distance, needing the vantage point of looking down at her instead of collapsing under the weight of her tears. "Who was that on the phone?" I asked, my voice flat. She swallowed hard. "It was Alex." I nodded slowly, the confirmation both expected and devastating. "And you told him you missed him?" Her eyes filled with tears. "Dan, please." "Answer the question," I snapped. Her shoulders slumped. "Yes." The room felt colder, like the walls themselves recoiled. I ran a hand over my face, my breath shaking. "How many times have you lied to me?" I asked. "How many nights did you crawl into this bed after being with him and tell me you loved me?" She broke into sobs. "I don't know. I didn't mean for it to happen, I swear. It just—" "Don't you dare say it just happened," I cut in, my voice sharp as glass. "Cheating isn't an accident, it's a choice. Every text, every meeting, every lie, you chose it, over and over again." Her sobs grew harder. "I was lonely. I needed something, and you weren't there." The words slammed into me, a bitter mix of guilt and rage. "So you punish me by finding someone else to fill the gaps? You think I wasn't lonely too? You think I wasn't killing myself at work for us?" She buried her face in her hands, shaking. I know. I was selfish. I was weak." I stood there, watching her crumble, and felt an ache I couldn't name. I loved her. God help me, I still loved her. But love didn't erase betrayal. Love didn't rebuild trust. "You've destroyed us," I whispered finally. Her head shot up, eyes wide. No, please, Dan, we can fix this." I shook my head, tears stinging my own eyes now. "There's nothing left to fix. You burned it all down." She lunged forward then, grabbing my hands, pressing them to her face. "Please, don't say that. I'll do anything. Therapy, quitting my job, whatever it takes. I'll prove to you I can be better." I pulled my hands away, my chest heaving. "You don't get it, do you? It's not about being better. It's about trust. And I can't trust you anymore. Not with my heart, not with my life." Her sobs echoed off the walls, raw and desperate. "Don't leave me, Dan. Please, you're all I have." Her words gutted me. For 6 years, she had been my world. Every dream, every plan, every late night laughing in bed, all of it had been with her. The thought of walking away felt like tearing off a limb. But staying meant dying a slow death, piece by piece, every time I looked at her and saw him in the shadows. I sank into the armchair across from her, burying my face in my hands. For the first time, I let myself break in front of her. My chest heaved with sobs I hadn't allowed myself to release, my body shaking with years of love and weeks of betrayal colliding. She crawled across the floor, kneeling in front of me, reaching for my hands again. "Dan, I love you. Please believe me. I made a mistake, but I love you. Don't throw us away." I lifted my head, tears blurring my vision. "You threw us away the moment you chose him." We stayed like that for what felt like hours, two broken people clinging to the ruins of something that used to be whole. By the time dawn crept through the blinds, my decision was clear. I stood, my voice hoarse. I'm leaving. Emily scrambled to her feet, panic flashing across her face. "No, you can't," I said firmly, "and I have to, for me." She shook her head, reaching for me, but I stepped back. "Don't, Emily. Don't make this harder." Her sobs followed me as I grabbed a bag, stuffed clothes into it blindly, and walked out the door. Each step felt like I was walking on broken glass, but I didn't stop. Because sometimes the bravest thing a man can do isn't holding on. It's knowing when to let go. I left the apartment at sunrise, my bag slung over my shoulder, my chest hollow. The city was just waking up. Dog walkers, joggers, the smell of coffee drifting from corner cafes. To everyone else, it was a normal morning. To me, it felt like the end of a life I'd spent years building. I thought leaving would bring relief, freedom. But instead, I felt heavier than ever, dragging chains of memories behind me. For 2 days, I stayed at Matt's place. He didn't ask questions, just handed me a beer and let me sit in silence, which was exactly what I needed. But silence doesn't erase rage, it amplifies it. And soon, all that silence crystallized into one burning thought. I need to see him. It wasn't hard to find Alex. I knew where Emily worked, and I knew he worked there too. I waited outside one evening, leaning against my car, my heart pounding as people streamed out of the glass doors. Then I saw him. Tall, broad-shouldered, dark-haired, just like I remembered. He laughed with a colleague, easy and relaxed, completely unaware of the wreckage he'd helped create. I called his name, Alex. He turned, puzzled at first, then wary when he saw me walking toward him. "Yeah?" he said cautiously. I stopped a foot away, close enough for him to see the fury in my eyes. "I'm Dan, Emily's boyfriend." His expression shifted, a flicker of guilt passing over his face before he masked it with something colder. "Look, man." "No," I cut him off, my voice low but sharp. "You don't get to look man me. You knew she was with me. You knew, and you didn't care." He held up his hands. "It wasn't like that. It was exactly like that," I snapped, my fists trembling at my sides. "You sat across from her in restaurants while she lied to my face. You touched her like she was yours, while I was at home building a future she was destroying." He glanced around nervously, co-workers slowing their steps, sensing the tension. "Dan, listen. Emily told me things were basically over between you two, that she was staying with you out of comfort, I thought." I laughed bitterly, the sound hollow. "You thought what? That gave you permission? That made it okay to step into someone else's life and tear it apart?" His jaw tightened. "I care about her, and maybe she didn't feel the same way about you anymore. That's not all on me." The words ignited something primal in me. Before I knew it, I had grabbed him by the collar, my face inches from his. "Dan." I turned to see Matt, who had followed me, grabbing my arm and pulling me back. "This isn't the way," he hissed. My chest heaved, my vision blurred with rage. Alex straightened his shirt, his eyes darting between me and Matt. "You're right," I said finally, my voice raw. "This isn't the way. Because no matter what happens, you'll always be the guy who couldn't win her without stealing her. You'll always be the shadow in someone else's story." His face hardened, but he didn't respond. He didn't have to. The damage was already done. I turned and walked away, Matt at my side, my fists still trembling. That night, I sat on Matt's balcony, a beer in my hand, staring at the city lights. My anger at Alex had burned hot, but now it cooled into something heavier, grief. Because as much as I wanted to blame him, the truth was, Emily had opened the door. She had invited him in. She had chosen. And no amount of rage could change that. A few days later, Emily showed up at Matt's apartment. She looked wrecked, hair unkempt, eyes swollen from crying, her voice hoarse. "Dan, please," she begged when I opened the door. "I can't lose you. I'll do anything. Just tell me what to do."
I stared at her, my heart twisting with both love and fury. For years, she had been my everything. But now, she is also my deepest wound. "You already lost me," I said softly. "The moment you chose him, you lost me." Her face crumbled. She reached for me, but I stepped back, the space between us wider than any physical distance. "This isn't love anymore, Emily," I continued. "This is pain, and I can't keep living inside of it." Her sobs filled the hallway as I closed the door, my chest splitting open with grief. It was the hardest thing I'd ever done. But it was also the clearest, because for the first time in weeks, I knew what had to come next. I had to let her go.
The first night without her was brutal. I lay on Matt's couch, staring at the ceiling, listening to the hum of the refrigerator and the faint traffic outside. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her. Emily in the kitchen making coffee. Emily in the passenger seat of my car singing off key. Emily asleep on my chest with her hair spilling everywhere. The memories weren't gentle. They were knives, each one cutting deeper, reminding me of what I'd lost and why. I didn't sleep. I just floated in that twilight space between exhaustion and anguish, waiting for dawn like it might bring some kind of relief. It didn't. The next morning, I forced myself out of bed and into the shower. The hot water hit my skin, but it couldn't wash away the heaviness in my chest. When I looked in the mirror, I barely recognized myself. Bloodshot eyes, stubble that bordered on a beard, a hollow stare. I'd always thought of myself as a strong man, resilient, dependable, the kind of guy people could lean on. But now I felt like a shell, like my strength had been siphoned out of me the moment Emily whispered someone else's name. Matt tried to keep me busy. He dragged me to the gym, shoved a basketball in my hands, made sure I ate something more than beer and pretzels. "Don't let her ruin the rest of you," he said one afternoon, tossing me the ball. I caught it, exhaled slowly. "It already feels like she has." "No," he shook his head firmly. "She took a piece, yeah, but you're still here. You're still you. Don't give her the rest for free." I wanted to believe him. God, I wanted to. But believing and feeling are two very different things. Days turned into weeks. Emily texted, she called. Sometimes she showed up at the apartment, pounding on the door until Matt threatened to call the cops. I didn't answer. I couldn't. Every time I saw her name flash on my phone, it was like reopening the wound. Instead, I threw myself into routines. Work, gym, late-night runs through the empty streets, my lungs burning, my legs screaming, just so I could feel something other than heartbreak. But grief is stubborn. It doesn't leave just because you're sweating it out on a treadmill or drowning it in work emails. It lingers, waiting for the quiet moments to sneak back in. Like when I made coffee in the morning and instinctively reached for 2 mugs instead of 1. Or when I heard a song we used to sing in the car and found myself gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. Healing wasn't linear. It was jagged. Some days I felt almost normal, like maybe I was moving forward. Other days I sank so low I wondered if I'd ever climb out. One night, after a particularly brutal day, I found myself back at our old apartment. I don't even remember deciding to drive there. I just ended up parked outside, staring at the windows I used to call home. The lights were off. Her car was gone. I sat there for nearly an hour, gripping the steering wheel, my chest tight with longing and anger. In the end, I didn't go in. I didn't knock. Because as much as I wanted to see her, I knew there was nothing left to say. That night, as I drove away, I realized something important. I wasn't just mourning her. I was mourning the man I used to be. The man who trusted without question, who believed love was enough to weather anything. That man was gone, and maybe he needed to be. The first real step forward came unexpectedly. At work, a new project landed on my desk. High stakes, tight deadlines, the kind of challenge that used to fire me up. At first, I dreaded it. But once I dove in, something shifted. For the first time in weeks, my mind focused on something other than Emily. I found myself staying late, not to avoid going home, but because I wanted to get it right. And when my boss clapped me on the back and said, "Damn good work, Dan," I felt a flicker of pride I hadn't felt in months. It wasn't joy, not yet, but it was something. And something was better than nothing. That flicker became my lifeline. Work, gym, small victories, little reminders that I was still capable of building, achieving, being more than just the guy who got cheated on. Emily had taken a part of me, yes, but I was learning, slowly, painfully, that she hadn't taken everything. There were still pieces left to salvage, pieces worth rebuilding. And maybe, just maybe, one day I'd be whole again. After weeks of hiding at Matt's, I finally drove back to my parents' house one Sunday. I hadn't planned it. I just found myself pulling into the driveway, the tires crunching over gravel, the old oak tree still towering over the front yard like it always had. Mom opened the door before I even knocked. She looked at me the way only mothers can, like she saw right through the forced smile, right into the hollow parts I was trying to hide. "Oh, Danny," she whispered, pulling me into a hug that smelled like laundry detergent and comfort. I didn't mean to, but I broke right there in her arms. Weeks of holding it together, of running and numbing and pretending, cracked open. I buried my face in her shoulder, my chest heaving with sobs I hadn't let myself release until that moment. She didn't say much, just held me, her hand rubbing slow circles on my back, like I was a kid again instead of a grown man in his 30s. Dad was quieter. He poured me a glass of whiskey that night, the two of us sitting on the back porch in silence for a while before he finally spoke. "She cheated, huh?" The bluntness surprised me, but I nodded. He took a slow sip, staring out at the dark yard. "Your mother doesn't like when I say this, but sometimes people aren't who we think they are. Sometimes they can't be what we need them to be." I swallowed hard, staring at the amber liquid in my glass. I just keep thinking, maybe if I'd done more, been around more, loved her better. Dad shook his head. "That's the trap, son. You'll kill yourself with what-ifs. Truth is, if she was going to betray you, she would have found a way no matter what. That's on her, not you." Something about the way he said it, firm, simple, hit me differently, like permission to stop carrying all of her choices on my shoulders. I stayed the night, slept in my old bedroom with its faded posters and creaky bed. For the first time in months, I slept more than a couple hours, deep, dreamless sleep. The next morning, I sat at the kitchen table, sipping Mom's coffee, sunlight streaming through the window. It was simple, ordinary, but it felt like healing. Over the next few weeks, I leaned on family more than I'd ever had before. My sister Claire dragged me to a family barbecue where my nieces and nephews tackled me in the grass, demanding piggyback rides. Their laughter was like medicine, pure, untainted by betrayal or loss. At one point, Claire pulled me aside. "It's good to see you laugh again," she said softly. I smiled, though it felt small. "It's been a while." She touched my arm. "You'll get there, Dan. You just have to let yourself." Letting yourself was the hard part. Because every time I started to feel light again, guilt crept in. Like I was betraying the pain, betraying the love I'd once sworn was forever. But slowly, I realized grief and healing could coexist. I could miss Emily and hate what she'd done. I could hurt and still allow myself to laugh at my nephew's ridiculous knock-knock jokes. I could feel broken and still start piecing myself back together. It wasn't either or, it was both. One night, I went for a run through the neighborhood near Matt's apartment. The air was cool, the streetlights casting long shadows. As my feet pounded the pavement,
I thought about everything I'd been through, the betrayal, the anger, the heartbreak. And somewhere between mile 2 and 3, something shifted. For the first time, I wasn't running from pain. I was running with it, carrying it, letting it move through me instead of trying to outrun it. When I finally stopped, bent over and gasping for breath, I realized I felt lighter. Not healed, not whole, but lighter. That night, lying in bed, I whispered something into the dark. Not a prayer exactly, more like a promise. I'll get through this. I don't know how long it'll take, but I will. And for the first time, I actually believed it. After weeks of hiding at Matt's, I finally drove back to my parents' house one Sunday. I hadn't planned it. I just found myself pulling into the driveway, the tires crunching over gravel, the old oak tree still towering over the front yard like it always had. Mom opened the door before I even knocked. She looked at me the way only mothers can, like she saw right through the forced smile, right into the hollow parts I was trying to hide. "Oh, Danny," she whispered, pulling me into a hug that smelled like laundry detergent and comfort. I didn't mean to, but I broke right there in her arms. Weeks of holding it together, of running and numbing, cracked open. I buried my face in her shoulder, my chest heaving with sobs I hadn't let myself release until that moment. She didn't say much, just held me, her hand rubbing slow circles on my back, like I was a kid again instead of a grown man in his 30s.
It's strange how healing doesn't announce itself. There wasn't a single moment where I woke up and thought, I'm better now. Instead, it crept in quietly, disguised as ordinary life. Like the morning I realized I'd gone a whole day without checking my phone for Emily's name. Or the evening I laughed so hard at one of Matt's stupid jokes that my stomach hurt. Or the time I caught my reflection in the gym mirror and noticed not the exhaustion, not the grief, but strength. It wasn't linear. Some days still sucked, but the good days were finally starting to outnumber the bad. One of the turning points came at work. My boss asked me to lead a presentation for a big client. A few months earlier, I would have declined, too lost in my own mess to even try. But this time, I said yes. Standing at the head of that boardroom, slides clicking behind me, I felt something I hadn't in months: confidence. Not just in the work, but in myself. When the client shook my hand afterward and said, "Impressive work, Dan," I walked out of that room taller. It was a reminder that I wasn't just a man who'd been betrayed. I was still capable, still valuable, still me. I also started saying yes to things I used to put off. Matt convinced me to join a weekend hiking group. At first, I hated the idea of spending hours trudging through mud with strangers, but somewhere between the mountain air and the shared misery of uphill climbs, I found myself smiling. One of the hikers, a woman named Sarah, walked beside me for most of the trail. We talked about music, about travel, about the best pizza places in town. She laughed easily, asked thoughtful questions, and, most importantly, didn't look at me like I was broken. When she asked if I wanted to grab coffee sometime, I hesitated. Not because I wasn't interested, but because part of me still clung to the past, still carried Emily like a phantom limb. I ended up saying yes, but not as a promise, just as a step. That coffee with Sarah wasn't a date, not really. It was two people sitting in a cafe, sipping lattes, sharing stories. And for 2 hours, I forgot to be the guy who'd been cheated on. I was just Dan, 32, working in marketing, addicted to black coffee and classic rock playlists. When we said goodbye, she smiled warmly. "Let's do this again sometime." I didn't know if it would go anywhere. I didn't need it to. The point wasn't falling in love again. The point was realizing I could. I also reconnected with passions I'd shelved during the chaos. I dusted off my old guitar, fingers clumsy at first, but slowly remembering the chords. I signed up for a weekend cooking class, surprising myself by actually enjoying it. I even started writing in a journal, something I'd once dismissed as not my thing. But it became my thing. Late at night when the apartment was quiet, I'd sit with pen and paper and pour everything out: the anger, the grief, the hope. Some entries were messy rants, others were quiet reflections. Over time, the words shifted. Less about Emily, more about me. One evening, months after the breakup, I sat on my balcony with a beer, watching the sunset bleed orange across the sky. For the first time in what felt like forever, I wasn't haunted by her face. I wasn't thinking about what she was doing, or who she was with, or why she'd betrayed me. I was just there, in the moment, with myself. And it was enough. That night, I called Matt. "You know," I said, "I don't think about her every day anymore." There was a pause, then his voice softened. "That's progress, man." "Yeah," I admitted, a small smile tugging at my lips. "It is." Healing didn't mean forgetting. Emily would always be a part of my story, but she no longer defined it. And as I sat there in the fading light, I realized I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was starting to live. Looking back, I realized the thing about love is that it's never just about the other person. It's about yourself, too. About knowing who you are, what you deserve, and what lines you will never let anyone cross. I spent so long believing that love meant sacrifice without question, that staying meant loyalty no matter the cost, that trusting her implicitly was proof of strength. But real strength, I've learned, isn't measured by how much you endure for someone else. It's measured by how well you honor yourself. Betrayal cuts deep, deeper than I ever imagined it could. It feels like the ground you're standing on has vanished, leaving you suspended in a void of doubt, anger, and heartbreak. But betrayal is also a mirror. It shows you your limits, it shows you what you will and won't tolerate. It forces you to confront the uncomfortable truth. Sometimes love alone isn't enough. I used to think resilience was a masculine trait, the ability to bury pain and keep moving. Now I know resilience is more nuanced. It's allowing yourself to break, to grieve, to rage, and still choosing to rebuild. It's not the absence of weakness, but the courage to face it head-on and refuse to let it define you. Walking away from Emily was the hardest thing I've ever done. I loved her, truly and completely. But love doesn't thrive on deceit. Love doesn't survive when trust has been fractured beyond repair. The man I am today is the man who recognized that staying would have meant sacrificing my own soul, and I refused. Healing isn't a destination, it's a process. It comes in small victories, laughing with friends without guilt, focusing on work with pride, rediscovering passions that remind you of who you were before the heartbreak. It comes in realizing that you can care for someone and still choose to leave if the relationship becomes poisonous. And somewhere along the way, I found something else, hope. Not the reckless, naive hope I had at the start of my relationship, but the quiet, steadfast hope that life doesn't end when a chapter closes. That you can find fulfillment in yourself, in your work, in friendships, in experiences, and eventually in love again, but on your terms. I'm still human. I still carry scars. I still sometimes feel the pang of loss when a memory surfaces unexpectedly. But those scars are reminders, not of weakness, but of survival. They're proof that I endured something devastating and emerged still standing. The most important lesson I've learned is this: love is sacred, but so is self-respect. Betrayal may shatter your world, but it can't take away the man you are unless you let it. You have to fight for yourself with the same ferocity you once fought for love, because the life you build afterward, stronger, wiser, whole, is the truest revenge. And now, when I look at myself in the mirror, I see someone who has loved and lost, who has felt the sting of deceit, who has walked away from what wasn't meant to be, and who has survived. That's all any of us can do in the end: survive, learn, rebuild, and keep moving forward. And maybe, when the time is right, open our hearts again, not for someone else to complete us, but for life itself, rich, unpredictable, and real.